Whatever the medium, whatever the story, getting the story requires interviewing. In art, as much as a science, where knowing what to say and knowing how to listen are equally important. Listen now, as 6 experienced interviewers from Elon University's Interactive Media Masters program share some of their favorite tips.
Conducting research prior to an interview is particularly important because it boosts your credibility as being an informed journalist. When I was interviewing Mark Rotenberg at Epic, we were able to talk about things and kind of open up the scope of the interview more than we would have initially because I had done a lot of research prior to the interview about projects that he was working on involving privacy. And he was more willing to talk to me about those projects because he knew that I understood what he was talking about.
A lot of times there's the temptation to settle for an email interview. But the problem with that is there are just too many opportunities in an email interview for the authentic content and sound bites that you need to get kind of erased and self-censored. Rather than getting nothing, I said, yeah, I'll just email you a bunch of questions. And so, a few days later, he got back to me like he said he would, but, you are hoping to get all these great responses, which is hard to do enough in a live interview. But the email interview I received was very, basic answers.
And they're like, oh, well, I'll come on down to your office. Well, in some cases, you might have to do that just for whatever reason, but that can be detrimental to your story for a number of reasons. Number one, when you're actually going to a place where the source is comfortable or a place where that story that you're covering is actually taking place, you're going to see things with your own eyes. They offered up coming into the office, but I was like, oh, no, let me come out to your place and, you can play the guitar for me, I'll take some photos and we'll talk. And it turned out great because not only did I get to interview her and take the photos of her playing guitar in her little studio, but I got to see that studio and I got to see all her guitars.
One of the most important things I've found when doing an interview is finding a common bond with that person, whether it be a common sports team, common hometown, whatever. I found that it really helps to get an interview started, get it going. The magazine was based out of California, so they had this sort of idea that I was like some surfer dude or something. So I always tried to find some common bond with them, and this guy worked out well because I went to Elon. So I mentioned that, and he definitely warmed up to me very quickly after that, and we talked about different places in North Carolina.
Have an idea of what your story is before you go and meet with anyone. That way you can gauge your questions and kind of get them to say the things that you need them to say to supplement your story. But also at the same time, you want to be listening to what they're saying, because if they start, pushing off the questions that you're asking and saying different things, you want to be able to shift your story mid-interview. All of the guys on the football team would basically stand in front of their lockers and we would go in a rotation to ask specific questions for stories that we needed for the week. But we were only allotted about 30 seconds to a minute to ask our questions before we had to move on to the next athlete. And so we had to make sure that we had very poignant questions. None of them were phrased in a way that would give them an opportunity to just say yes or no.
Your first tendency as a journalist when you're interviewing someone is to jump right in and ask those tough questions. Things like, what's the solution? How do we fix this? Why did things fail? The problem with that is, if you ask those questions off the bat, your source might get nervous. They might clam up. They might not be comfortable with you yet. They might need some time to sort of think through things. So you want to space out your questions so that the toughest ones are near the end. Fight broke out in the stands. Cops were called in. I had no idea what was going on. All I knew is once the fight was cleared, one team scored a big goal, went ahead and won the game. First thing I want to do is ask questions about this fight when I'm talking to the coaches and the players. But I knew it might be sensitive, so I waited, asked questions first, general questions about the game plan, what worked, what didn't, and then started asking how they reacted to the fight. Then asked what the fight was about, what they heard.
There you have it. Start practicing these 6 tips today, and you're sure to get better details, better quotes, better stories. For more tutorials and insight into the world of citizen and participatory news, visit worldwidewebnews-revolution.com.